I'm out here on the Beast Coast to test Adidas' new technical trails racer, the Terrex Agravic TT. TT does stand for Technical Trails, and we are gonna get into them today out here in New Jersey. Believe it or not, this is actually one of the smoother trails out here at South Mountain Reservation. I had an idea about the first aspect of the TT that I wanted to lead with in this review, but now that I'm running out here, I think I'm gonna actually switch it up a bit. The TT does notably have a rock plate in the mix. This is becoming somewhat obsolete, or at least less used in the world of trail super shoes. A lot of companies are going to carbon fiber plates or just leaning into more flexible shoes in general. If you typically run in the terrain underfoot that you're seeing on screen right now, it's probably leaving you a little bit in the dark as far as protection underfoot with this new shift in trail running shoe setups. Yeah, I just actually ran in a loop. You can see how easy it is to lose your bearings around here. Perhaps that's not 100% true for some of the more Eurocentric trail running brands, but I have been living out in Boise, Idaho for the past 7 years or so, definitely leaning into the more runnable styles of shoes that you see prevalent in the American West, both terrain-wise and race course-wise. I've been struggling a little bit back home to find the correct trails to test this shoe in. A lot of it due to the seasonal availability of certain technical trails that I would want to try out, but also a little bit to do with the stiffness of the shoe, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. I was finding the rock plate to be a little bit stiff and a little bit obtrusive underfoot, but now that I'm running over here, it's certainly feeling protective and helpful on some of this stuff. It is more or less a full coverage rock plate up front. You've got a 4-finger design, 3 splits, and 4 fingers of, I would say, plasticky type protection. Not sure the exact material, but the breadth of the plate itself does span the entire width of the forefoot, going up to the toes even. The rock plate certainly adds an element of tippiness to the shoe, which I did primarily notice back home. But again, of course, rock protection is rock protection, and it does help in that department. Joined back on the yellow blazed Lenape Trail, which you saw in my Cloud Ultra Pro versus Kip Summit race video. Back then it was quite a bit snowy, so this is all the kind of stuff underfoot that I wanted to test those shoes in. But you'll get a good look at it now in the Adidas TT. Let's talk some specs while I'm heading up this way. 10.9 ounces, 310 grams in my US 10. That is an EU 44.0. That is a little bit on the heavy side, considering lightweight super foams in the mix these days. High cushion, super trail shoes that are tipping the scales at much lighter weights, but this is not that type of shoe. If you want to have that rock plate in the mix again, you're going to give up some weight to get that added protection. Midsole stack is 39.31 for an 8mm drop. I measure it at 37.29. Pretty accurate on the spec there, so you are getting a healthy amount of stack with that bit of a higher weight. What is going on here? Is the East Coast going soft? These switchbacks were not here. I'm used to switchbacks out west, but not so much on the East Coast. Sign said it was to reduce erosion, so I think that's okay. Unlike the more runnable, racing-oriented Speed Ultra 2, you have a mix of Light Strike Pro and Light Strike Plus underfoot here, not full Light Strike Pro, as in the Speed Ultra 2. The Light Strike Plus is of course going to be a little bit denser, a little bit heavier than Light Strike Pro, and given that you have more of that in the mix with the TT, certainly a contributing factor into the higher weight. Speed Ultra 2 is listed at 10.1 ounces though, so it's only a difference of 0.8 ounces here between the two quote-unquote racing models in Adidas lineup. Not a huge gap considering I don't think you would want to be running the Speed Ultra 2 in this type of terrain underfoot, that's for sure. Speaking of which, ground platform here is at 123.77.87. Noticeably broader platform here with the TT. I believe the Speed Ultra 2 is even a full 20 millimeters narrower under the middle of the shoe, but that is probably the most extreme narrowness, or one of the most extreme narrow shoes you will see under the midfoot. They did up the lug depth in that Speed Ultra 2, but you've got a full 4 millimeters throughout the bottom of the shoe here with the TT, and that's a significant difference between these two models. Oof, hitting some patches of mud here, and you're definitely gonna have the traction and stuff that you need, certainly in that type of mud, if you're running in it consistently, that is. Aside from just the width of the platform, I find that it's the height at the heel, which is also a significant difference here in the TT. Way less rocker, specifically under the heel in this model. That's definitely making it more stable on technical terrain. Both shoes are listed at an 8mm drop. I'm not quite sure it has that high or unstable 8mm drop feel, certainly with this shoe. But the Speed Ultra 2 definitely feels quite a bit lower. You have the big heel rocker, and it just feels way lower than 8 millimeters. It could even pass for, say, 4 millimeters, because once you step in that shoe, your heel really sinks down, giving the impression of being a lot lower. This shoe, not having that empty kind of rocker space under the heel, really stands up and gives you support underneath the heel. So when you're ground striking, I'm definitely doing a lot more dancing around today than I typically would on the trails back home. You're really not like fishing for that stability under the heel as you kind of are with the Speed Ultra 2. That one, of course, it really wants you to be forward leaning, really wants you to be up on the forefoot, and a lot of times, especially in terrain like this, you know, you are up on your forefoot when you're kind of dancing around, but you still have to have a full foot landing. A lot of times you just have to have a lot more variability in your ground strikes in this type of rocky terrain compared to Speed Ultra 2, where you'd primarily be running fast in, say, smoother terrain. First thing you'll notice here is I did use a box lacing. You might have seen this in some of my reviews featuring the ACG Ultrafly. I was getting pressure right under the middle of my foot on the bottom side in this area. I've got two different variations here. This one I have an opening a little bit lower. I'm through the first 2 eyelets. On this side, I'm through the first 3 eyelets. I was just feeling a little bit pressure, I think, further around this area, so I wanted to open up this spot a little bit more on my left shoe, see how it felt. Both of them actually feel good on the trail today. I'm really not sure which one is better. Kind of like this one here, giving me a little extra kind of tightness down here while still keeping this kind of bump in the top of my foot unrestricted. It's just the plate, the rock plate here, I talked about it being full coverage, so the 4 fingers kind of fan out. There's gaps, 3 gaps in between the fingers of the plate, and they cover the entire ball of the foot, probably around up to the very front. But the plate does kind of extend all the way to the back of the shoe with 1 finger there, and I think the transition of the plate to the middle of the shoe, it kind of hits right where the transition in that 8mm drop actually hits. So you've got the 4 fingers coming together around the middle of the shoe right in this area, and then you also have the swoop in the drop, seems to be right here. It just feels very prominent under the arch in this shoe, and that was giving me some just irritation, not necessarily irritation, but just pressure under my arch. Now that I'm out on the run today, it's actually less noticeable than the ACG Ultrafly. I think the variability in this technical terrain is just making me move my foot around a lot more, pick up my feet, be on different angles on the ground, not just straight hitting the same spot in the more runnable terrain that I have at least early in the season out in Boise. So I'm feeling actually much better with that arch pressure. I was gonna be probably more negative on that aspect of this shoe before coming out here. So I'm glad I'm out here in New Jersey testing this shoe. It's really interesting that it feels a lot better. Again, I think it's just the variability of the terrain, but you could maybe see over here you have way less swoop than the Speed Ultra 2. The Speed Ultra 2 is really pretty extreme. It swoops up a lot here. This one, you're really on the ground until almost way back here. So when you're landing, it just feels very, very stable on the ground. But that also does give it that kind of swoop down here, similar to the plate shape in the ACG Ultrafly, which is really bothering my feet. This one has that similar kind of shape, and I feel it here. But again, the lacing is helping a lot, and I think the variability of terrain is helping a lot. So I'm finding it a non-issue out here today, which is really great and positive for this shoe. So I've got a US 10 EU 44 here, and I find that to be perfect sizing wise. Probably 3/4 up front. There is a bit of a tapered shape, so I typically run a US 10, which is a half size up from my true to size in Adidas, and it's perfect right here. I actually feel like with the Speed Ultra 2, I have a little bit less space up front, even at a 10. Check out my Cascadia Elite sizing for ultra shoes type of discussion. I talk about the secure uppers and the giant kind of rockers and different shoes, maybe leading me to want to have even a further half size up in certain trail super shoes. Speed Ultra 2 is one of them, where I may even consider having a 10.5, but at a US 10 here in this one, I'm finding it quite perfect, quite secure. Width at the forefoot is very good, no problem at all. I like this. It is kind of tapered, but not so much. Again, at the half size up. So I think it is crucial that you do get that half size up. Edges of the fronts of your toes don't get caught by the taper. And also, you've seen the rocks that I'm contending with out here today. It gives you a little bit more bumper space. You do have a healthier bumper here in this shoe. It's wider, comes up here. This is not a crazy protective toe cap here for sure, but you do want to make sure you have that extra space, so when you do like kick a rock, it's not hitting your toe there. Being that I changed the box lacing I talked about in the ACG Ultrafly, it alleviated the need for me to lace lock, I think just opening up the flex in that shoe. But I still found a little bit of looseness in the heel with the TT here, so I did add the lace lock. The tongue is a tiny bit short, I would say. I wish this was a little higher, but I am still covered here by the tongue, even with the lace lock, so it is just barely acceptable here for me. You have a different heel padding setup here with the TT compared to the Speed Ultra 2, of course. You've got more traditional ring of cushion in there. It feels great, nice and comfortable. I feel well seated in the heel cup here, but again, I do have to lace lock though. Without that, and one aspect of it, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in another review, I feel like the first eyelet here in this shoe and also the Speed Ultra and the Speed 2, which I do have, I feel like it's very far forward. The distance from the back of my heel to that eyelet, it seems pretty far. I think a lot of shoes have this first eyelet or the upper situated in such a way where the first eyelet is just a touch further back, maybe where actually this second eyelet is. Another thing you could do is lace directly to the second eyelet, but then that leaves a pretty big gap between here and then the next eyelet you would lace. So that's a little tricky. I find that with this lace lock, I'm not actually getting a lot of pressure from this higher upper row here at all. So even though it is a lace lock to lock in my heel here, I don't think it's actually a lot higher than most shoes that I'm running in. So it's just a little bit different setup here. Again, it's just, it seems far, like a big opening in this shoe from here to here. Man, it is such a gorgeous day out here today. Had a few cold days since I got here. Had to be out on the road doing a little bit of Mount to Coast C1 testing, but also The legs were sore from a 6-hour race I just did, so wanted to keep it smooth for my first few days over here. But weather warmed up a bit and it is great to be out here on these trails again. It has been quite a while for me to be out here on the trails that I cut my trail running teeth on over here. Did a few crazy fun races over here back in the day. It's just fun to run in terrain like this. One of the things out west I had to get used to is just running consistently, nonstop, and really kind of pushing all the time. Certainly in racing, there's just a lot more runability and no space to kind of move around. Less space, I should say, for variability of terrain underfoot. It's just, you gotta push all the time out there, and here it's just different, super fun. Kind of gotta dance around at times, just have some fun. You could really pick different lines, like where you're gonna place your feet, and that just makes it so much fun. Trail running is supposed to be fun, right? I remember my first trail race out here, Feb Apple 10 miler, February. It was freezing, but muddy, icy, slushy. I remember finishing that race and being like, oh my God, that was so awesome. I had been road running, marathon running, all that, and then just bombing through snow and slush and muddy terrain, coming out of it completely mucked up. I mean, I was hooked. I loved it, and still love it. So don't ever let them tell you humble running does not know technical trails, or at least refer them to this video. Really like the foothold of the shoe. Again, with so much rockiness underfoot here, I like that locker under the heel, and the protective aspect really allows me to just kind of not worry as much about where I'm landing my foot. Stability is still, I would say, stability in regards to tippiness. You always want to keep that in the back of your mind. You don't want to land on something crazy uneven without paying attention to it. But the rock plate and the firmer Light Strike Plus does give you some allowance to kind of put your foot in different places and not worry so much about getting really jabbed underfoot by a rock. Certainly in less technically oriented shoes, less protective models, I'd have to take a lot more care in where I'm putting my feet, just more at risk of just building up those rock impacts over time. Even if one particular kind of jab is not so bad, over the course of a longer run, and if you're racing, of course, those little bumps and impressions underfoot, they do tend to add up. I did a couple of crazy Sasquatch races here back in the day. Switchback challenge, I think they're still going. I did a 3 and I believe a 6 one time. I had pretty solid results there, or solid amounts of loops on this switchback course. That was pretty crazy things to start off with in trail running. I gotta go back and see how my results are standing in those races at this point. It's been quite a few years. They reversed the direction, at least at that time, year to year. So I'd be either running up this switchback part, they're kind of long switchbacks, or running down it depending on the year. I don't know. What happened to the pavilion? Oh, that's the up part over there. Apologies for the bit of nostalgia here. It's been a little while, I can't help it. How'd you like to do a timed event? Loops on this course right here. I think I might have done 18 laps in the 3-hour one. Gotta double check that. The rock plate is definitely not overly stiff. Quite a bit of flex as I'm going up here. Not restrictive at all. Not noticing that same type of stiffness that you typically feel with carbon fiber plated trail super shoes. More or less unrestricted flex during climbing. Really not an issue at all. Last little close up here. check the shoe flex. Talking about it as I was climbing there. Pretty easy flex. That is quite a flexible rock plate. You could see the orange bits of the rock plate on both sides of the shoe there. It's kind of just showing how wide the plate actually does extend there. You have those similar little wings. They're more aggressive in the Speed Ultra 2. It extends the platform without fully extending the midsole. It does add a little bit of adaptation along the edges of the shoe, but that is more apparent in the Speed Ultra 2 than this one here. These little kind of notch outs are not that big here. They're a lot bigger in the Speed Ultra 2. But again, checking the flex here, you see how much there is at the front of the shoe. So that's great for climbing, but I alluded to the stiffness that I was feeling in my early runs in this part of the shoe, and that is an area where there is not a lot of flex. A little bit of twisting here. Pretty decent here for having a rock plate in the mix and this amount of foam underfoot, but not crazy flexible. Again, you want to have a lot of protection under, say, this part of the shoe, and that's what I'm really feeling as I'm going downhill, and even flat sections where I'm traversing these kind of rocks we've got over here. I find that I could just land the foot wherever I need it to be without paying too much attention to where I'm going to be, because I know more or less from here to here it's really protective. That's where the majority of the stack is. The rock plate does extend probably about to over here, and again, less flexibility there, so you have a good amount of protection here. And with the rock plate being up front, it's deflecting and eating up a lot of stuff under the forefoot. I didn't really notice any sharp hits getting through to the bottom of my foot throughout this entire run, and I've been out here 7.3 miles, over an hour or so, a lot of rocks, so it's definitely doing a good job here. Quick spin around the upper. Again, I talked about tongue height being, they could extend it just a little bit. I don't have issues. Again, I am lace locking, so it's a non-issue for me, but maybe with different volumes of feet for different runners, you may find that a touch low. The padding is pretty good on the tongue. It extends down the center, pretty much from here all the way down through here. Nice little bit of padding there. I don't feel any lace bite at all. Looking around the heel there, totally different setup. Certainly than ASU 1, also ASU 2, they did improve a bit, but this is more or less standard kind of heel cup padding here. Nice heel cup in there. It does seat the heel well, but again, I was noticing slippage, but that was more due to the stiffness of the shoe, not the lack of padding around here. So very comfortable around here. I don't notice any rigidity around the edges here. Certainly I have a lot of side-to-side foot movement as I'm traversing a lot of these rocky sections, and that is something I would definitely notice, and I have noticed in previous Adidas models. I had some ones in the past that were very vicious around the ankle collar, and that is not the case in this shoe. So if you've run in previous maybe 2 to 3 year old Agravic models and had issues with the ankle bite in those models, that's not an issue at all in this one here. This one's quite comfortable, in fact. Looking at the midsole here, the Light Strike Pro is this section from here to here. Pretty interesting setup in that it's like a little pocket along the middle of the shoe, and it's kind of wrapped. This is the Light Strike Plus, firmer Light Strike Plus. It's kind of like a bathtub thing, but it doesn't wrap along this one. You have the Pro extending to the outside, so a little bit different. The Arc'teryx Silent 2 is one where they have a TPEE casing that wraps all along the exterior. Here you have a bit of the Pro. You can definitely feel the more responsive cushiness of this one, but it does not feel like a cushy shoe underfoot. Again, this Pro is not super deep, and then you have the plastic already right there, and then the firmer layer throughout the rest of the underfoot there. It does not ride like a soft, cushy shoe. It's definitely a firm feel. If you're in runnable, firmer terrain, it's not going to be as soft, as energetic, certainly as the Speed Ultra 2 or other kind of super shoe racing models, but the firmness is there to add protection. If you're running in the terrain that I'm running in today, luckily enough for this test run, that's where this is going to be a positive factor for you. You're not really just slamming the same kind of footsteps over and over again. You're kind of moving around side to side, and that firmer kind of layer wrapping around here gives you good feel and control. The ride of the shoe is certainly going to be one that favors trail running where you need a level of protection, not just a nice to have kind of situation in other kind of runnable terrain. A lot of stuff, in fact, that I come across in Idaho, even in some of the technical areas, I could kind of get by in less protective shoes. This shoe is gonna feel probably firm, a little bit stiff under the middle of the shoe. As I said, similar issues that I feel with the ACG Ultrafly, although not as bad. If you noticed or saw me flexing that ACG Ultrafly, you'll notice a huge difference between the flexing I did with this TT here. You of course don't have the same carbon fiber plated lever effect as you do with that ACG Ultrafly, but the flexibility here is much more appropriate for true technical terrain. Coming up on a pretty runnable yet definitely rough on the feet section here. This is an area where the TT will be certainly advantageous. Kind of plowing through here, not paying as much attention to exactly where I'm putting my feet. It is actually kind of hard to do that in any shoe, but I'd probably be handling it a lot more gingerly if I didn't have this amount of protection underfoot. Stability also is quite good. Plenty of room to be turning my ankles here, that's for sure. Could come down to pure chance, but it hasn't happened yet, so that's a positive. So that's a wrap on the Adidas Terrex Agravic TT for technical trails. I'm gonna go ahead and enjoy this final section here. I have heard in the comments that the TT has sort of gotten a bad rap. I'm really glad that I did hold off on testing them until now. I was actually waiting for some more technical trails out in Idaho, but even better to come out here and try them in New Jersey. Kind of had the feeling that my initial impressions of the shoe were really based on just not running them in fresh legs and also just not running them in the type of terrain that they're really designed for. Even on top of that, I still am surprised, quite surprised in fact, by how much I've enjoyed this run so far in them. They have by far exceeded my initial reservations and initial expectations after those first few test runs. I guess that really leads into my final thoughts and conclusions on this one. The shoe is designed for a certain type of terrain. It says it in the name, in fact, TT, technical trails. Anything short of that, and it is going to feel like a firm shoe underfoot. It might even feel, in fact, like a dated style of ride. I'm finding that you do need this type of technical terrain underfoot to bring out the positive aspects of this shoe. The foothold, the protection, outsole traction, of course, what could be felt as arch pressure in more runnable terrain becomes a more supportive aspect once you start dancing around. Thank you for tuning in once again. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of different scenery than you would typically see on the channel. I've got the Speed 2 next up for test from Adidas. I do have one quick trail interval session in that one, but want to test it out in more kind of day-to-day daily training. It certainly feels like a fun shoe to run in every day, so keep an eye out for that one. A little promo here for the Feed and Amac X. I'm traveling, of course, so I brought these mix packs along with me. First time I've tried them. This is Turbo Drink. I've got watermelon and lemon. I've actually had the lemon today, used the watermelon yesterday, and it was excellent. This is a kind of small packet, and you've got 40 grams in here, 300 plus milligrams of sodium, plus potassium and magnesium. I really like, where am I going here? Let's go this way, I think. I really like the taste of these. Nice light flavor, 1 to 0.8 glucose to fructose, right where you want to be. Amac X Turbo Drink again here. These are really great. I'm gonna order up some more. I'm actually not sure where I got these, if I got them at TRE or if I threw them onto one of my feed orders. Check out my link in the description below. Help support humble running. You'll get 10% off whatever you order from thefeed.com. I'm always on the hunt for varied drink mixes. It's good to have variety because sometimes you just get tired of what you're always taking. So These are pretty good. 40 grams in a packet is pretty solid. If you can add on a couple gels at 30 grams for smaller ones, you're right at 100 grams in an hour. Or Amex has a 40 gram gel. A couple of other brands also have 40 gram gels. That puts you right at 80 grams with even just one gel per hour. So great option here. Please like and subscribe. Check out the website, of course, www.humblerunning.com. Sign up for my newsletter. I also send out links and discount codes, affiliate stuff through my newsletter, so always helpful to have those. Thank you again for watching and your continued support of the channel. I'm gonna catch you back in Idaho.